Let's start then. I think we have like limited hours. I have a lot of slides. And usually like it happens with my sessions that I'm just setting the context right and the expectation right. Usually in my sessions, it takes longer than I expect it to be, right? So I'll try to finish this in 2 hours, but the Q&A might stretch beyond that, right? So just like setting the expectation right so that you folks are not in for the surprise. Let's start then. I think we have like, so very quickly, I'll set the agenda of the session, right? So the first we would talk about like classifying products. Now classification happens in multiple ways when it comes to product, depending on the stage and state of the product. But we will talk about the classification that's more relevant to product market fit discussion, right? The second would be defining the PMF. The third will be measuring the PMF, and the fourth will be improving the PMF. So this is, by the way, define, measure, improve is one of the like cornerstones of Lean and Six Sigma revolution, right? And I remember it from my intern at ITC days, right? And it has never left my side. Like whenever I'm thinking of a new topic to learn better, I always go through define, measure, improve, right? The last one is what to do when nothing seems to be working, how to decide when nothing seems to be working, because we have been told again and again in our life is quitters don't go far ahead. But I'm also here to tell you that actually like it's actually good to quit sometimes. You should not be very, very stubborn. There is a fine line between insanity and genius, right? Okay, so that is the agenda of the session, right? Very, very, very simple. Like classify, define, measure, improve, and then like how do you ditch this whole shenanigans around PMF, right? Before we go further, I like to do a quick poll so that I can move faster or slower in certain topics, right? And this poll is more around the sort of audience that I have. So I'm launching this poll. You should be able to see it on the screen. I will reserve 30 seconds for it, not more than that. So just mark whatever seems appropriate and we'll move forward quickly. So we have, by the way, I love sharing the poll results also. So I'm ending the poll in 5 seconds and then I'll share the results. Okay. So we have 25% less than 2 years of experience, PM or founder experience, 3 to 6 years, 50%, which is like the mid-senior level, 7 to 10 years, 10%, and then another 5 to 10% and plus years of experience. Looks good. So you folks have built, like most of the folks here have built multiple iterations of the product, which is a good thing. So let's go after classifying the products, right? Now classification, like I love to do this sort of classification where I take like one axis as ARPU, which is average revenue per user, and the other axis as frequency, right? Why I love this is because this takes out a lot of noise when we are thinking about products. And mind you that when I say that consumer products have lower ARPU, I'm talking about most of the products have lower ARPU. I'm not saying that some consumer products can't have a higher ARPU than small and medium business products, or even sometimes like enterprise products, right? So this is a general guideline that with increasing ARPU, the nature of the product and product market fit also changes, right? With frequency, the nature of the product and product market fit also changes. So we have infrequent products like Airbnb, Eventbrite, App Annie, right? In different categories like consumer, SMB, and enterprise. And then we have higher frequency products, which is like Zomato or Blinkit, Freshdesk, and Salesforce, all right? And you will see that the way we define PMF for these products is actually different, definitely for frequency, but even ARPU affects it sometimes, right? Other classification that I love is on the basis of value generation. See, ultimately, like for PMs, it's all about value generation. If you're not generating new value for the user, we won't be adding much value to the organization, right? So in the cycle of growth that I usually teach in sort of my advanced growth program, there are three factors, right? So the first is acquisition, the second is value generation, the third is monetization, right? And the way a product generates value can also become the basis of classification. For example, like there are products which enable transactions and make money through take rate. Amazon is an example. That is a transaction product. There are products which capture attention and make money via ads. Facebook, Google, some of the biggest companies actually do this. And then there are some products which improve productivity and make money via charging the customer. Your cell phones, your data cards, all are like productivity products. Along with that, your calendar, your drive, and everything is also your productivity sort of. So basis the value generation, the reason you want to classify the products is because the way you will define PMF will change for a transaction product as compared to attention product. For example, it would be a little futile to talk about daily active users for Amazon, but it will make a lot more sense to talk about daily active users when it comes to attention products like Facebook or Google, which is why Meta talks about monthly active users, daily active users, stickiness and all. Whereas Amazon talks about the number of transactions, the volume of transactions, the value of transactions, right? And most of the productivity software actually lies in B2B setup, where like even the Chat GPT, which launched as a B2C sort of product, is maximizing the value generation in actually like B2B setups, right? People have like paid licenses in B2B setup and they're using ChatGPT to improve the productivity. So for productivity, it could be like number of paying customers, the churn of these customers, because usually people churn if they don't see a remarkable difference in their productivity before and after buying your product, right? So the definition of like value generation also determines which are the right things to look into when you're talking about a certain product, right? Now that we understand, I'll just summarize, right? So we talked about like classifying products based on ARPU and frequency, and we are talking about classifying products on the basis of value generation, right? Which is transaction, retention, productivity. Now let's go to a simple quiz because it helps me understand like how much you have understood. It also helps you understand like how much you have understood. So if I'm asking about YouTube, where would you put YouTube when it comes to the classification based on value generation? And this is a quiz. It's a single choice quiz, which is where like it's slightly easier as compared to if I had made it multiple choice, multiple correct, actually. Okay. I'll close it in 5 seconds. Just pick your mark. It's anonymous anyway. Like nobody is going to see your grades. Okay, so I think 96% of you are right. If you look at the YouTube, the majority of what happens on YouTube is around gathering attention, and the majority of the revenue of YouTube also comes from ads. So it's an attention product. That said, over the years, YouTube has moved to become a productivity product by adding DIY videos, by adding, you know, cooking recipes and all that, right? So it has like become a productivity channel as well for a lot of people. A lot of education tech companies have been built in India based on like YouTube channels and all. So it has gotten from attention to productivity. It still has got a lot of time to get to transaction. It has tried few things like creator transactions and all that, but those don't make it a transaction platform, right? So the topmost is attention, then it's a productivity sort of platform, but transaction is far away. I'll just check the chat. And Aditya has this question: would Zomato fall into attention and transaction both? So Aditya, Zomato is an interesting bit because Zomato started as an attention product, right? Zomato started as a discovery platform, and most of the discovery platforms are actually start as attention products, or they feel like attention product, but ultimately they make most of their money through transactions, right? Through either like lead generation. For example, if you look at Zomato was very similar to like a classifieds, right? And the classified is not an attention product. It's basically like when I want to transact, I go to sort of classifieds. I don't go to Zomato if I don't want to eat. I don't want to transact with restaurant, right? So while it feel like initially it was not helping people do transactions, so it is in attention category, Zomato is actually like a transaction product. At the start, it was not enabling transactions. It was just enabling discovery. But usually like that translates into them generating leads in the next phase, just like housing 99 acres and all have done in classified segment. And then finally them doing it end to end. For example, if in real estate, you sort of start onboarding projects and you start selling it on behalf of builders, you become a transaction platform very, very quickly, right? For Zomato, it was easier because everything was digital. But I would say it belonged to transaction category because it enabled transaction through its platform in some way, right? And even today, if you look at its GMB distribution and all that, right? Ads is not that much of a sort of revenue contributor as compared to the transactions that it had. right? But I think I understand the confusion, right? If I'm a PM at Zomato, I would actually look at both attention and transaction category. I'll focus more on transaction category, but I will also look at attention category because it is a discovery platform along with a transaction platform.
Thanks, Deepak.
Would Shopify fall under productivity or transaction? Shopify is a productivity tool. Think of it like this. So, okay, by the way, if you're trying to classify it in one category, right? A product can fall in multiple categories, first of all, right? YouTube will fall with attention and productivity. But if you have to classify it into one category, the way you have to think is what is the major way in which this platform generates value? Shopify generates value mostly because it saves a lot of developer time and designer time. In a way, it boosts productivity of a lot of companies there, right? And it is first and foremost a productivity platform. And then it has added a, checkout layer to it and payment gateway layer to it. Compare that to, let's say, Razorpay, or compare that to, let's say, Stripe, right? Now, Stripe is primarily a transaction platform, right? And over time, it has moved to productivity, which is like it enables transactions. But over time, it has taken a good check on developer productivity, and it has sort of created tools so that it is easily integratable into sort of any website and all that, right? But even in case of Stripe and Razorpay, I can always argue that it is both a transaction and productivity platform. It's not just a productivity platform, or it's not just a transaction platform, right? So I think having a confusion to some extent is actually good because it will push you to look at both kind of metrics for the product. And then you can make sense basis the North Star of the company on what is the company's current focus on. Does it want to sort of focus on productivity, or does it want to focus on transaction? Does it want to focus on discovery, or does it want to focus on delivery in case of Zomato, right? So the focus of company also sort of determines like where do you over index when it comes to analyzing and sort of focusing in a company, right? Okay, so that just give me a moment. I think I have my WhatsApp open, and that is, yes, this should be good. Okay, so now that we have gotten that out of the way, let's talk about the core thing, defining PMF. Now, defining PMF does not have to be difficult. You can just go to ChatGPT and ask about like, how do I define PMF, right? The problem is, I think some of the best definitions from the internet, ChatGPT will take those, it will try to sort of organize those and sort of put it in front of you. And something like this can appear, like product market fit means that being in a good market with a product that can satisfy the market. This is like written by Mark Anderson, who popularized this term in 2000s. Like he was writing on this, like they started Anderson Horowitz afterwards, but he was writing it on his own blog and all that. There is like some archive, PM archives, like which is Mark Anderson archives. But he talked about PMF, and PMF became sort of a very, very popular term. Like when we entered, like even in India, like it became very popular around 2020s. Like in 2015, people were not talking a lot about PMF beyond the investor and founder community. But now I think PMs have started to understand it, right? So being in a good market with a product that can satisfy the market, I think this is a good answer. The problem is this answer does not help me. How do I improve PMF? What if I'm not in a good market? What if I'm in a market where like people say that it's a bad market? And what if my market is not happy with the product that I have, right? What should I do then? How do I get to the PMF given the situation that I'm in right now? Like that's something which is a problem for PMs and founders, right? And that is what we are going to cover in this whole session, right? So let's start with the necessary condition of PMF, which is you have a product, and I'm just going to sort of synthesize it in a way that it's very, very easy to answer with a yes or no, right? When you ask people whether you are in a good market or not, it's hard to say yes or no. Like, was Airbnb in a good market when it started? It's hard to say yes or no. Did it satisfy the market? Of course not. Like the initial version of Airbnb did not satisfy the market, which is like travel and all, right? So this is a very subjective definition. Now let's make it a little more objective by going to necessary condition. Now the necessary condition is you have a product which is preferred over alternatives in the market for certain jobs to be done or certain use cases, as we call it, PMs, right? Preferred over alternatives in the market for certain use cases. If you talk about Airbnb in the initial stage, it was a product preferred over hotels in the travel market when people wanted to save money, or when they were students who wanted to do, who were like more reliant on couch surfing and sort of doing it on low budget and all that, right? So in the initial days, like it had like certain use cases or certain jobs to be done, in which case like people actually preferred it over alternatives, which were much more expensive. Over the years, it moved from, let's say, just being a cheaper alternative to a cheaper and better alternative by saying that we will connect you to locals. You'll get to know about, the local markets. You'll get a breakfast with it and all that, right? So they sort of improved the product over time and they got a better PMF. Now it is like people, in fact, sometimes prefer, sometimes what? Like I prefer actually Airbnbs over hotels because it's more open. Like it is, I can sometimes get a house just for myself and my family and all that. And it's a lot better than hotels in that case. So the necessary condition is a product preferred over alternatives in the market for certain jobs to be done. The sufficient condition adds one more thing with sustainable business model. Now I know what some of you are thinking, which is, yeah, but most Series B startups have gotten a PMF because that's why they got Series B. Usually like pre-PMF is seed and Series A. Series B is when you get a PMF, and that's why you're getting like the money for growth in Series B, C, D. But we haven't seen a sustainable business model for these startups. So why do we need to add sustainable business model when it comes to sufficient condition of PMF, right? And that's a debate I feel like is a very healthy debate, because you will see both sides of it. Like you'll see people saying that as long as people love my product, I have PMF, right? And you'll see people who say that it's fine if people love your product, but you're just giving $1 or 90 cents. Of course, people will love your product, but where is the business? The best PMF is if you give me like 90 cents or I give you $1. Who in the world would not want that? But is that really PMF? That's the question we need to ask. Because the product preferred over alternatives in the market, where I can get like 5% in a year or 10% in a year if I go for stock market, versus you're giving me like, I'm giving you 90 cents, you're giving me $1. Like I would definitely prefer this over any other debt instruments or stock market or anything. So there is definite preference for this product over alternatives, but does it have a sustainable business model? And that is where it fails the sufficient condition of PMF, right? And that is something which I feel like a lot of companies in India did not pay attention to when we were sort of like just getting into internet companies and all that. And a lot of companies failed because of this. We felt that monetization or sustainable business model is something we'll care about tomorrow, maybe when we have like raised $100 million and all. The problem is because you didn't care about the design of your product initially when it came to monetization, later it was very hard to do so in some cases, right? And because of that lack of thinking, you can say lack of like rigor, a lot of companies actually failed. A lot of product actually failed, right? So that's a sufficient condition. Now, sufficient condition, like let's evaluate a couple of things, right? So let's say we have this cycle of growth. I love cycle of growth, by the way. You can ask like the people who have taken like advanced growth program. I love cycle of growth because it simplifies things so much. So this cycle of growth, acquisition, value generation, monetization. Suppose your acquisition cost is $100. Your value generation cost also is there. And I'm just talking about, let's say, variable costs, which is like, you need like 5 people to support and 10 people to sort of go and talk to consumers, 10 teachers to teach the class and all that. Let's say like that sort of cost, where like if you add a user, you have to sort of shell out additional money. So let's say value generation cost per user is $100 and monetization is $50. What I'm asking is this cycle sustainable? Yes or no? Just put it in chat. Okay. So this brings me to sort of, because I love quantifying things, this brings me to the concept of gross profit, which is revenue minus variable costs. Variable cost is anything which varies as you add more and more users. For example, in Uber, variable cost is driver incentives, because for every ride, there is a variable driver incentive that Uber has to shell out, right? For driver, the variable cost is petrol cost, right? But the car, the cost of procuring a car is actually a fixed cost, right? So that's the variable cost for you. So revenue minus variable costs. So if you have gross profit greater than zero, there is a chance that there is a good chance that you'll be able to build a big and strong business. And part of the reason is because in internet businesses, like once you have covered the variable cost, there is very few cost centers left. And at scale, you can always sort of manage those cost centers and get a net profit, right? But gross profit is very, very important. So if Ola is losing on every ride, if Uber is losing on every ride, it is not going to sort of be a sustainable business, or you can't say that it has met the sufficient condition for PMF. It has a necessary condition of PMF, right? There is another reason, like why this is important, right? And hear me out. So let's say we have this acquisition cost, value generation cost, and monetization to $500. Now, is this cycle sustainable? And I'm going to ask somebody in the audience to explain me why, why is this a sustainable business model? Just because I'm generating profits, is that it? Or is there something more? Retention, of course, but I can have like without retention, I can have, this cycle sustainable. Like pmcurve does not have, for example, like the courses I build, they have retention, but it's not like I have like daily, weekly, monthly, or that sort of retention. It's basically people pay me upfront and then they take the courses. So I don't have retention with me because it's an infrequent product that I'm building. But still, if I'm telling you that I have a very healthy profit after tax, PAT, is my cycle sustainable? The answer is yes, right? So gross profit determines whether a cycle is sustainable or not. But what else? Like gross profit means that your company can survive for sure. What else? Yeah, somebody was saying, opening the mic and saying something. Sorry.
I have a question.
Yes, Ranjit. Question, can you put it in chat so that like...
Hi, Deepak. This is... okay.
Yeah, Bilash.
Yeah, Deepak. So what I was trying to say is, so here, like you said, though it's an infrequent product, at 100 acquisition cost, you are able to generate a positive value of $400 out of that customer immediately. So so to sustain the business, it really and assuming this is the only way of monetization say that then the only question for the business becomes on having a long pipeline of customers to whom to acquire and monetize. So does that maybe makes the business
Yes. I think you're onto that, right? And I think somebody else also put it in chat that you can spend more on acquisition. Anand put this, right? So because you can take this money back to acquisition and you can acquire more users, you can keep growing the business. And growing the business is also a thing when it comes to sustainable business beyond the profit, right? So there are only two components of business that investors or founders have to care about in the long run of things, right? Really long run things, like you have to ensure that the business survives. For business to survive, you need to grow the business. Because if the business is not growing, for example, like when Google was not growing, let's say across like few years, or their profits stopped growing, you saw like how stock market actually penalized them. And look at this year's like the quarterly results of Google, and the stock market has actually sort of rewarded them, right? So the growth rate also matters along with the profitability, right? And businesses are usually rewarded on both. Now, because you have extra money, you can funnel this back into acquisition and you can create a virtuous loop of growth, right? Now I'll take some of the questions in the chat and sort of get back again to summarize this whole point or this whole section. So Ranjit has this question: how are we able to monetize more than the value generation? So Ranjit, you can monetize more than value generation. So first of all, like the clarification is the cost of value generation. It's not the value of value generation, right? So the cost of value generation can be lower than what you charge. For example, the cost of creating a course for me could be a month, but I can get 100 people at X amount of money. And that is more than what I can make in a month as an opportunity cost. So that's basically, I'm able to put a cost for value generation, but the monetization can be greater than value generation. right? The value of that value generation is, of course, determined by the market. We talk about all the price elasticity and all that, but it's eventually like the value of value generation. Usually, like you can only extract a part of the value you generate, which is where like your question is coming from. Your monetization is a subset of the overall value generated for the user. Suppose you saved 5 hours for them. They put their time as $100 per hour. The value generation is $500. So they are willing to pay you $50. So that way it's accurate, but the cost of value generation can be lower, right? That's to answer that. And I think Prabhat has said made the same point, which is like scale and grow. So if it does not grow, is it sustainable, right? And profits just give you that sort of runway to grow the business. What else? So suppose like I have this business model, which is the case for most of the startups, right? I'm spending $200, I'm making $50, and I'm still growing. How is that happening? How is that cycle happening? I think that the answer is obvious, right? Venture capital. So basically, external capital can be pulled into acquisition, more and more acquisition, and sort of value generation cost. And then you monetize a part of it and you can still sort of grow. Uber grew like first 5-7 years like this. Ola is still growing like this. I don't know if they are profitable yet, but my sense is they're not yet. But the point is like, it's basically external capital can pull in and that can sort of still grow the product. But even for any investor or any founder that you meet, the long-term strategy is always to show a picture where it's actually profitable and it's growing. If a founder or a VC is not able to sort of show that, or a PM is not able to show that, there will be lesser budget or lesser funding for that project, right? So just keep that in mind when you think about PMF, right? Just to summarize, right? The sufficient condition of PMF is a product preferred over alternatives in the market for certain jobs to be done. Certain jobs to be done is important because you can't be preferred over alternatives in the market for everything. Even Amazon is, for example, even if I'm, let's say, a loyal Amazon customer, I don't prefer Amazon for everything. Sometimes I'll buy from Flipkart, sometimes I'll buy from Blinkit. Even if I'm buying my quick commerce from Blinkit, I don't buy everything from Blinkit. Sometimes I'll buy it from Zepto, or sometimes I'll buy it from Big Basket, right? So certain jobs to be done is very, very important in the context of PMF. The second thing is it has to have a sustainable business model, which is defined by gross profit greater than zero, and preferably a path to profitability. And the second is there should be a room of growth. So if you have achieved everything, if you have saturated the market and there is no way like you have 100% market share and the market is not growing, you don't have any additional avenue of growth, you'll still not have a sustainable business model. So room for growth is also very, very important along with the profits that you make in the business, right? So that's defining PMF. Now let's move to measuring PMF, which is like, now we are getting into exciting part, by the way. This was, I would say, like slightly boring. Most of you already knew like most of it. Let's go to measuring PMF, right? When it comes to measuring PMF, like let's revisit this chart where we are saying ARPU, enterprise, SMB, small and medium business, consumer, and then there is infrequent and highly frequent, right? And let's talk about two spectrums of products. First is frequency, first is like frequent products, second is infrequent products. So when it comes to frequent products, I think we know what the answer for PMF is. If I have to measure PMF, the best way to measure is retention, right? And when I say retention, it has to be like the blue line, not the red line. So let me explain this chart, right? So retention is usually defined as if 100 people came today for the first time on my app, like day 1 retention is how many people came the next day. Day 7 is how many people came after 7 days. Day 30 is how many people came after 30 days. Now, this is the definition of retention. Now, why do we want a curve which is actually flattening? Is because some of these people, in this case, like 27, 28, 30%, 40% people are actually coming back again and again, days after days after days. And we are talking about a frequent product, something like, let's say, a Facebook or WhatsApp, where people coming back again and again means that they prefer this product over alternatives. So if they don't prefer this product over alternatives, they won't come back whenever the need arises. But if they prefer a frequent product over alternatives, they will come back whenever the need arises, which is a sign of PMF, right? So it ties back into the key definition of PMF, which is preferred over alternatives in a market for certain jobs to be done, right? Now the question becomes, what happens to the red line? In case of red line, the problem is People are coming back. It's not that some of the people are not coming on day 1, day 2, day 3 and all that. But after, when it comes to day 10, everybody has gone out. Nobody is coming on day 10 from day 0, which is a problem because you are not preferred over alternatives. It's not that everybody has lost that need of, the problem that you're solving. For example, if you're a messaging app, it's not that people are not messaging anymore. It's just that they're not preferring you over alternative. And this happened with Signal, right? So Signal, like Elon Musk tweeted, and a lot of people went to Signal. And then most of them actually moved out of Signal over time because they could not put their network there. And in absence of their network there, like they could not retain there because there were limited use cases. Now, so that's basically retention is the measure of flattened retention is the measure of true PMF in case of frequent products. Even in retention, the problem that happens is you have to measure it at the right frequency, right? So the frequency is usually the frequency of the need. For example, if I'm looking at Zomato's retention, I would be going by a weekly retention because I know that most of the people would have the need to order from outside once a week or eat outside once a week. So on the discovery or delivery platform or combining both, I would at least try to see a weekly retention. But I'll not see a daily retention because it's not that everybody is actually ordering every day from Zomato, right? So the frequency of the need or the jobs to be done or the use cases actually determine whether you should be looking at daily, weekly, or monthly retention, right? And while mapping this out, like you have to make sure that the graph flattens. If it does not flatten, then it does not have the PMF, right? Now let's take like couple of use cases. Let's take some exercise so that when you are looking at a product next time or data next time, you can actually determine it for yourself whether it has PMF or not. So let's say there are 2 products which are launched in the same market to solve the same problem. Both launched in January 2022, same month. Both are getting 100K new users every month. And this is how their monthly retention looks like. If you want a link, I can give you this link. Just put it in chat. So this is how their monthly retention looks like. Now my question to you is, will the MAU for A and B be same or different for Jan 2022? So A ka month 0 retention is 100%, then 40%, then 30%, 25, 20, 20, 20, 20, 20, right? So if I am going back to the MAU for A and B, yes. I'll go to the poll. Tell me if the MAU for A and B for Jan 2022 be same or different, by the way. Both launched in Jan 2022. I'll take 5 more seconds and then I'll close. Okay. See, this is the difference between theory and practice. In theory, there is no difference, but in practice, both are different. So the correct answer, as you know, is same. Now, let me revisit this question. Both are launching in Jan 2022. The question is, will the MAU for A and B for Jan 2022? So in Jan 2022, the new users that came for A is 100K. The new users who came for B is 100K. And there is no play of retention with A and B. That's why they are going to be the same. But let's revisit this question now. If you had to calculate, assuming that A is acquiring like 100K users every month, January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, and all that, right? Will the MAU for A stagnate? Now, I will give you again the poll. This will take a little bit of time, by the way. Sorry. You'll have to go back. You'll have to calculate. You'll have to think before you answer and all that. Okay, I'll close it. Share the results. Majority is correct this time. I don't know why majority was not correct last time. So let me tell you, because it's very important. See, just knowing that retention, there's a difference between knowing something and knowing the name of something, right? I think Feynman said that. And that's what I keep seeing in like even classrooms. Like we know that retention should be flattened and all that, but when it comes to actually using it, we take some time, right? So if you have worked on retention problems, it will be easy for you to see that the acquisition and retention are usually two variables, right? And we are saying this is 100K. I don't want it to be. Okay. Right? So this is 100K every month. And like for eternity, it's basically 20% retention. Now, what you'll realize is in December, let's say 12 months from now, I think the M0 is like people, 100K people are coming. 100K people are coming in December, right? These are new users. But from November, only 40% are retained, right? Which is a month one retention. So this will be 40K. Okay, come on. This is basically 40K, right? And in month two, which is like from October, the 100K people who came in October to December is just 30%, right? Because by month two, only 30% people are coming back. So the people who came in October, if those were 100K, the people who are coming in sort of December of those people is actually 30K, and so on and so forth. And what you'll realize is you'll add all these numbers to calculate the number of people in December. But if I ask you what happens the month after, you will see that another 20K gets added, another 20K gets added and all that. The beauty of retention is because the long-term retention, it flattens at 20% and you are acquiring new users every month, 20% will keep getting added to the monthly active users, right? And you can do this exercise at home after we are done with this session. But the point is retention, flattening retention not only helps, like it's not just a sign of PMF that people are using your product again and again. It's also the precursor to sustainable growth. You are actually growing as long as you are acquiring customers, right? But compare that to the next product, where in month 8, the retention goes to 0. Here you will see the stagnation happening. Here you will see that after 255K, there is 0 growth in sort of monthly active users, even if you keep acquiring 100K customers every month. Why? Because after 7 months, everyone is gone. Like from January to December, in December, when I'm looking at MAU, everybody from January is gone, right? But in case of A, 20% of those are still coming. So in case of like flattened retention, the curves keep stacking up. But if it goes to 0, curves don't stack up. And that leads to sort of stagnation of growth, right? Okay. I think I'm going to take few questions. If there is no question on these particular things, right? The last part is like, which has PMF? I think you already know the answer to this question, right? So A has PMF because it has flattened retention. Now let me take some questions. The first question is, what is the typical industry benchmark numbers for good retention for PMF? That's an interesting question. What if I told you there is no benchmark for PMF retention? Because see, PMF is all about finding a segment of users who keep using your product over alternatives. So it could be 5%, it could be 10%, it could be 15%, right? and you'll still have PMF. The only thing that you need to change is possibly targeting, that these 5% who keep coming back, let me get more of these people. But we'll talk about that. How do you improve PMF, right? But usually there's no benchmark for PMF for a good retention. As long as the curve flattens, you have PMF. If the curve does not flatten and sort of in the long run, in month 12 or month 24, everybody goes out of the window, you don't have PMF, right? The second is, how do we capture attention when a user is active in M1, was probably inactive in M2, and then again active in M3? So Amit, think of it like this. Let's take two examples, right? The first is Airbnb and the second is GST software. So GST software requires you to come every month. So in that case, your M1 will be greater than M2, most of the cases, right? And that's easy to understand. In case of Airbnb, the problem is like if your user is coming in M4 after M0 and then M6 and all that, possibly you need to measure quarterly retention. So the first thing that you need to understand is if there is a natural gap between the need for users, like people travel every 3 to 6 months. If there is a natural gap, probably you should not look at month retention. You should look at quarterly retention or half yearly retention. But suppose this is a monthly product. Suppose this is a GST software. And we have one user who is active on M1 and then not active in M1 and active in M2. At an aggregate level, you'll still find for most products, the M1 retention is higher than M2 retention. But if that is not the case because of seasonality or whatever, because you ran an offer in M2 and all that, that's perfectly fine. You don't need to worry about that. As long as like people come to M3, they stay there, right? X% of users actually like stay there, or they stay at M1 level or whatever. Like as long as it does not go to 0, you still have a PMF or a chance at hitting PMF quickly, right? So it does not matter if your curve is wobbly like sinusoidal wave, or there are like jumps and then dips and all that. As long as it does not touch 0, I think you're good. Just like put it in chat if there is any follow-up question. I tend to pick those also. Anshul has this interesting question, and now we are getting into application of it, which I love, because I think we have talked about measuring retention and we have talked about defining retention. So we are talking about EdTech. How to define retention in EdTech space where people are bound to exit once value is delivered and they might never come back in most cases, which is the next segment, which is infrequent products. So just wait for a while, Anshul, and it will be answered. Abhilash has this question: this retention is flattened at 8%. How can we know if this is good or bad retention level? So Abhilash, I think we'll come to sort of this particular question in improving retention. I don't want to give a premature sort of answer to this, but this is answered in sort of how do you benchmark and improve retention? How does this work for low frequency product? Again, next section. If M1 is a subset of M2, M2 is a subset of M3, and so on and so forth. Can you explain more about M1, M2, M3? So Prabhat, like again, retention definition is not a subset. Like it's not that M1 is a subset of M2. M1 is a superset of M2 and M2 is a superset of M3. By the way, I think you wrote subset when you meant superset. It's usually like if 100 people are coming in January, M1 is in February, how many are coming of those 100 people? M2 is how many are coming off those 100 people, 100 people or 100K people in January. March retention has nothing to do with February, people coming in February or not. March retention has everything to do with like the initial cohort that you picked to analyze retention. And that is the definition of retention people often confuse. There are usually two confusions. The first is, I think in month 3, I'll count those who came in month 2. No, that's not the way to define retention. Retention is defined as how many of these people are coming in month 3. How many of these new users are coming in month 4 and all that. Just like this, it has to be a subset of the original cohort of users. That's it, right? The second confusion that happens is people define retention with both new and returning users. And that is basically that's so common that I can't even like say that it does not happen. Like people will look at all the users who came on day 1, on 5th of January, then of them, how many people came on 6th of January? That's not the way to define retention. Retention has always been defined as people who came for the first time on 5th of January. How many of them came on 6th January? is the D1 retention, that cohort. So always think about D1, M1, Q1 sort of retention, which is defined with respect to new users, not with respect to all users or with respect to a subset of a subset or superset of a superset, right? So Abhishek has another question. I think infrequent products have a lot of questions. I'm going to that section next, right? But let me summarize this thing, and I'll come to Vinay's question as well. So retention is the key to PMF and user growth in frequent products, because frequent products means frequent needs. Now, in frequent products, you need to have flattened retention because it implies that people are preferring the product over all other alternatives for certain jobs to be done again and again and again. That's why you have a retention, right? The second thing is flattened retention is a prereq for sustainable cycle of growth. If people find you valuable, there is a good chance that you can monetize. In case of, let's say, attention products, it's very easy. If people are coming back again and again on Facebook, Facebook will just show them ads and they will monetize, right? So for attention product, we don't have to worry because merely like people coming back and retaining gives me monetization capabilities. But even in, let's say, a productivity product and all, when you put a premium plan, people who are using it again and again are more prone to pay it. There's a good chance they will pay for it, right? Even in transaction products, like something like Amazon can charge if it can show to seller that I will get this user again and again to buy from you, right? And Amazon charges seller whatever amount of money that they charge, 15%, 20%, 5%, right? But their take rate depends on their ability to get buyers to buy on a sustained basis, right? On a regular basis. So flattened retention is a prereq to sustained cycle of growth, and flattened retention is the necessary condition of PMF for frequent products. Let's go to infrequent products, and that will answer a lot of your questions, because in India, we have a lot of infrequent products, by the way. We have not built Twitter and Meta and Google, which we keep sort of learning from. We have built 99 acres, we have built Naukri.com, we have built even like Zomato, barring Blinkit and Zepto story is more like it's not an infrequent product, but yeah, less frequent product. But anyway, coming back to infrequent products, Airbnb, Eventbrite, App Any, 99 acres, Naukri is for SMBs and enterprise both, right? But let's talk about these products a little bit. Even EdTech like pmcurve or Unacademy or PhysicsWala, like all these are like, or Upgrad where I worked, all these are like infrequent products. So the best answer that you will hear, in fact, like when I ask this question to people, they come up with like CSAT. If I have good CSAT, I have a PMF. Because of, why not? Like we have been told again and again that if people love your product, that means that you have PMF, right? If it's satisfied, even Mark Anderson sort of wrote that, if it satisfied the consumers, it has PMF. So why not? Like, why don't we use CSAT as a customer satisfaction score on a scale of 1 to 5 or 1 to 10 as a good place to measure PMF? My own thesis is it's not a good. In fact, like I don't use CSAT more than like, it's more like a feedback to me, but I don't use CSAT or NPS as a measure to sort of PMF or pmcurve courses, right? It's more like a feedback to me, like on where I can improve, and I'm more interested in the subjective feedback of it, but it's not a proxy of customer satisfaction, or it's not a proxy of my PMF. And the reason for that is three. There are three reasons for that. The first is CSAT or surveys usually have a sampling bias. So people who are happy usually will fill out the survey. What if majority of people are not happy and they're not going to come back to your product? They will not fill the survey. In fact, people who hate your product will actually mark your email for survey as spam, or will just dismiss whenever a feedback screen appears, because they have this sense that they're very annoyed with you and you're just like pushing some more work down their path, right? So CSAT has sampling bias, and it's very important if you're using CSAT, you want to measure CSAT well, you remove that sampling bias. You make sure that it represents all set of segments in CSAT. The second is survivorship bias. And this is a very interesting story, which sort of I wrote 3 years back about. So this is from World War II, when sort of the planes of allies went to war, then came back, and they were trying to figure out what the weaknesses were, right? And they said that, okay, we need to put heavier armor near the places where the planes are getting hit most. Because if we can put heavier armor on those places, what will happen is even if more and more bullets are hitting those, they won't penetrate these planes, right? But the problem is that they were just looking at planes which came back. Similarly, you're just looking at users who came back, right? You're taking feedback from people who came back or who are planning to come back at least, so that they're, and that's why they are giving a survey response to you, right? But what about the planes that got hit and didn't survive? So in fact, there could be a chance that you never found the spots where these planes were hit who didn't survive, right? And in fact, it will be inverting this plane problem to sort of arrive at that conclusion that maybe every plane that got hit in these parts actually survived, and every plane that got hit in the parts where this plane didn't get hit actually didn't survive. So we should put heavy armor on places where there are no bullets, right? And that's survivorship bias. And that's very, very common with CSAT. Another reason why I actually don't like CSAT as a proxy for PMF. Now, the third is Hawthorne effect, which is why I don't use ratings as ratings or reviews as the PMF proxy for pmcurve, which is like when you are in a room, when you're in a room full of people, or when I'm asking you to rate me over something, knowing that it actually matters to me, I can come back and ask you some more questions and all that. Your response could be different than the actual response. And this is called Hawthorne effect, right? You go to a party, you are just like eating something that the host has made, and you tend to say that it's amazing. But when you are given the same food, like when you're alone, you'll just throw it in the dustbin, right? So we tend to behave differently when people are seeing us as compared to when people are not seeing us. And this especially happens in case of, education, tech, or even in real estate, where like you are asking your broker, or like even in restaurants where you ask your the people who are servicing you to get the feedback from you. Of course, there is a Hawthorne effect at play there. Like I don't know this person who I have known, like unless I'm very, very pissed off, I don't know how I would rate that person lower, even if I didn't like the food or I didn't like the service especially, right? So Hawthorne effect, survivorship bias, and sampling bias all play together in different contexts and situations when you use CSAT, and which is why CSAT is not a great thing for infrequent products unless you address all three, right? I'll give you a very simple example. Most airlines have poor CSAT. Now, what if I told you Indigo has poor CSAT this year, but it has the highest share, its share is growing, and it is profitable? Does it have PMF? And because we have a room full of PMs, we can even call it the Jira effect. Jira is a tool every PM hates. I think at least the PMs I know hate. It has poor CSAT, but it's profitable, it's growing, it has the PMF. And we can keep complaining about Jira. Like if Jira were sort of measuring the PMF using CSAT, they would lose their sleep, right? Same is true about, by the way, like Microsoft, some of the Microsoft products before Satya took over. People who have said no, yeah, feel free to ask questions. Indigo has a terrific PMF, even if its CSAT is poor. So now that I've ditched, I've ditched like CSAT as a proxy to PMF, what do we do in case of infrequent products, right? So the answer lies again going back to definition. I'm a big fan of go back to definition. Like whenever you are confused, and this is something I used to do. Like one of my close friends, while I was preparing for JEE, I was not good at physics, and I think there was this person like sort of Kumar who was extremely good at physics, and he told me this, like, just go back to the concept. Keep going back to the concept, right? Because if you understand the concept really well, the only thing that can happen is you lose your way while you're trying to apply it. And I'll say the same when it comes to like even measuring PMF of frequent products. If you know the definition of PMF, the necessary and sufficient condition of PMF, you just need to go back to that definition to answer this question: how do you measure PMF for infrequent products? For example, preferred over alternatives. would usually be given by the share of the market either staying the same or growing for some particular use cases. Because if I'm cars 24 and I'm not preferred over alternatives, my share is going to go down. Because in infrequent products, there's a lot of word of mouth, right? In education, in cars, in real estate, word of mouth trumps everything because the ticket size is so high. The trust deficit in the country is so low. We go via referrals, right? We buy lands via referrals. We buy flats via referrals. So market penetration is the sort of key to PMF for infrequent products. Barring that, like you have to go to like gross profit, which leads to sustained cycle of growth, and the growth in market, which is market growth or market penetration growth, right? So you can grow either by sort of because the market is growing and you are growing with them, or you can increase your share and sort of do that, right? Now that we have market penetration and gross profit and market growth as three things, we can define. So these are the problem is these are all like lagging indicators, right? So I have to sort of find some leading indicators of them, and which is why like CSAT kind of is a leading indicator of market penetration if you have built the right mechanism to avoid survivorship bias or sampling bias or this and that. But CSAT should not be the end. CSAT is a proxy to market penetration. NPS is a proxy to market penetration. Referrals is the best proxy to market penetration. Because if you have referral for infrequent products built in, and if your referral is working, you have an inherent PMF. Like I said, in a country with trust deficit, it's very hard for people to refer bad products to their customers, right? And that is part of the reason, like when I tell people, like, I'll give you my own sort of example, and this might come off a little bit PM curve centered, but like bear with me, because I like to feel that like I have to live what I'm teaching, right? So when I tell people that PM curve has zero CAC, which is like so far we have spent zero on marketing, and we have gotten like this year we'll be doing somewhere around like 150, 200K USD ARR, right? People are often surprised that where are the people coming from? Are they coming from my LinkedIn following? Are they coming from Growth Catalyst? The initial group definitely came from there. But most of the people I'm getting now are actually coming from referrals, right? And that is my answer to PMF. Referral is how I track PMF of PM curve, because referral is the leading indicator of that. Barring that, I will look at like the growth rate of PM curve. I'll look at profit. I'll look at market penetration and all that. Like, for example, how is like Reforge growing? How is, let's say, Reforge in a different market, but how is GrowthX growing? Or how is sort of like Reforge in India growing and all that? All those things I have to keep in mind while evaluating PMF. So PMF for infrequent products have to be a lot more nuanced as compared to frequent products, right? And you have to do more work there, but the reward is also high because usually gross profit is given in infrequent products. You have high ticket size, you have a very, very clear, business model and all that. So you don't have to worry. Like in education, you get money upfront. In real estate, you get money upfront and all that. So you don't have to worry about gross profit, provided you are growing the right way, right? So that's basically the gist of frequent and infrequent products for you. I'll take like a couple of questions. Atul has this question. By the way, like, I'll just go back to the questions and see if those are answers. Anshul, is it answered for you? Just like comment there if it is answered for you, or just open your mic and tell me if it is not. Vijay. Anshul, Vijay. And then there is tax product. So clear tax, let's take an example, right? So let's take two examples actually. Let's take one edtech and one clear tax. So clear tax, for example, like again, the clear tax PMF will be measured by like the total number of taxes filed in a particular year and the percentage of that market that clear tax captured, right? So we will go after, market penetration year on year. And then we will also take a proxy of market growth rate. How is like the number of taxes filed grow year on year, right? And what is the share of clear tax in that? And finally, we will look at gross profit. And this is where you feel that clear tax initially, the initial design of clear tax was everything is for free. And then they have introduced some monetization mechanism in the last couple of years, but they have struggled. And which is what I was saying when I said, when you start thinking about sufficient condition of growth, when you are starting out, it becomes easier to design your product that way. You don't have this struggle like somewhere down the path, right? And looking at like clear tax financials, it's clear that they have a winner product at hand, by the way. It's just that they didn't took possibly the sustained cycle of growth that seriously because the capital was cheap and capital was available, right? Or they took it and it's a difficult market to crack. Again, I'm not saying that they didn't have this mind. That's a hypothesis, right? But maybe like they tried it, but it didn't pan out because different markets behave differently. But gross profit is where they are struggling, right? Even if they have a higher penetration, even if they have a higher share of market, right? So all these three signals need to be evaluated for infrequent products to have a sufficient condition of PMF met. Same for education, by the way. You can look at education, let's say K-12 education, you can look at like the share of the market, you can look at growth of the market, and finally, you can look at your CAC to LTV ratio, right? Because in education, more than anything, referral works very, very well. If you look at PhysicsWallah, it has grown on the sheer power of YouTube and referrals. Like people tell others about PhysicsWallah and they come to YouTube channel, or they discover PhysicsWallah through YouTube and they go to PhysicsWallah. So it has been profitable because its CAC to LTV is amazing, right? Better than any edtech player in the country. So that's for edtech. Is there a way to measure PMF before going to market? Before going to market, again, like Atul, like again, the problem discovery, problem validation are the ways, but it will, a lot of time people say things, even if you are the best user researcher in the world, people will say and behave differently, right? So unless you have a fantastic product like IRCTC at your hand, where people hate staying in line for 4 hours, and they will of course like book ticket online if given away. Unless you have something like that, it's very hard to measure PMF and be sure about the PMF before you go to the market. There is a way to minimize your investment to measure PMF, which is the MVP approach we discussed in the last section while improving. So MVP is the best way to measure PMF before you go to the market. Because ultimately, see, the reason you want to measure PMF before you go to the market is because you want to invest less time and money and have lesser sunk cost and still sort of know the answer to PMF, right? So that's MVP will meet those criteria, but we'll discuss like how the common definition of MVP is different than the actual MVPs we have seen in the world. We have like a couple of examples from the real world MVPs, right? C side of competitors also matter, Rohit. Yes, but it takes a lot of spying to get C side of competitors. It's also important to understand competition in the sense that you can be in the same category and still not compete with somebody. So you can be in real estate, but you're still not competing with somebody if your use case is very different than the competition use case. So use case is very, very important to define competition. That's another thing that I keep telling people when they talk about PMF or when they talk about benchmarking. We'll talk about that, benchmarking. Indigo, only because there are few alternatives in the space. Few alternatives to the value they're offering, yes. Few alternatives to the supply chain they have built, yes. Few alternatives to the whole value chain, like including the cost optimizations at every level, which gets delivered to the customers in sort of reduction in cost, yes, right? But again, that all of that makes a better product. Indigo has a better product as compared to alternatives and a preference from customers as compared to other alternatives, right? Otherwise, it won't succeed. How to measure PMF for low ticket size infrequent services? I think this is answered. Does NPS score has correlation with PMF? Again, Abhishek, NPS has the same problems as surveys, right? It has like the Hawthorne effect, it has sampling bias, it has survivorship bias. So if you tackle all those things, it will have a correlation with penetration or PMF. Ramesh, I think we have discussed all of this. Prithvi has this question, and then I'll also go to Navya's question. So right now, every company is jumping into AI hype and building AI features. How do you, I think this is relevant for most of us, right? So the thing is, when a company is, see, even in AI hype and AI features, the use cases or jobs to be done stay the same for the customers. It's not that customers have changed their behavior because of AI hype or AI features. For them, it does not matter. If you offer a better way to solve something, I think they'll jump to it, that, right? So the definition and measure of PMF for AI-related products is same to sort of the frequent and infrequent products. Most of the AI products are actually frequent in productivity domain or retention domain. So you can apply retention lens to AI-related products. But if ClearTax tomorrow is using AI in its product, the only way to measure the PMF will be measured in the same way as it was before, right? Nothing changes. So focus on the frequency of the use case and whether it's preferred over alternatives when it comes to those use cases on. Coming on next. So coming on next is improving PMF and then pivot, like a little bit around pivot. And then few final words from my side when it comes to PMF, because one of the first questions I asked in this session, which most of you gave wrong, actually ties to the last words that I speak about PMF. Coming on next. So cool. Over to the most exciting section, which is improving PMF. Now, improving PMF, I think there are 2 or 3 things which I feel I have missed in my career. And if I had known these things, they would have actually helped me get to PMF very, very quickly, you know? So the first I have always done, the customer type, context, and use case, right? So people want to use upgrad when they don't want to go to university because universities are expensive. They don't want to shell out 10, 15 lakhs. They want to shell out like 3 lakhs for a degree to university. They can get a degree, they can get a job, and the degree will be useful for them throughout their life and all that, right? So the customer type, context, use case is something that I've already done. I've always done, right? The second part is where, the second and third is where I have not focused that much in my career, right? And I've not seen people focusing that much, which is who loves your product, who merely uses your product. And why do they love your product? And why do they merely use your product? The answer to why, even if it does not fit anywhere in the quantitative definition of PMF, it will help you improve PMF significantly. It will make you confident. I think there was this question, which is like, how do I know if I have PMF before I ship the product? The only way to know the reasons why people would prefer your product, why people will love your product over the alternatives. And I know this sounds simpler, and yet like I don't see people actually spending more than 20% of their time talking to customers, right? And believe me when I say that there is no other way to know who loves and who merely uses your product, who is going to leave your product, who prefers your product over alternatives, why they prefer this, unless you spend an hour with a single customer, right? Because then you'll be able to understand something which is very, very relevant for improving PMF, which is super fans and fence sitters. For example, like in pmcurve, I know that at least the initial PMF has been around people who are super curious to learn, right? So the advanced growth program, products and then strategy, because they don't promise a job or anything, they are for experienced PMs. The people who have come to this program are the people who come for the love of learning. So that's one persona. The second people who love it are the people who are insecure in their current jobs, which is they're good, but they have this imposter syndrome, right? And this sort of, they come here so that like they can cure that imposter syndrome, which they falsely believe that they're not good enough for the job, or they're not just killing it in their jobs, right? So those 2 people love the product. I also know people who merely use the product, like the courses that I teach, right? These are the people who have come through referrals or their manager told them to go and join this course and all that. But a lot of them actually merely use the product. They don't love the product. Now, knowing this, I can improve my PMF by targeting people who have sort of imposter syndrome, who have sort of like, who love learning, because then I can double down on my learning things. Like, for example, the reason I'm doing this session is so that you can see how I teach, how I create content, how I create assessments and all that, right? This is a free demo for that, to be honest, isn't it? So if you know these things, if you can define your customer type, the context in which they use the product, the why they use the product and all that, you'll be significantly better at coming up with ideas to improve the PMF. you'll also be significantly better at removing the noise, which is saying that, oh, we don't want these people. They keep complaining. Their pain point is not good enough for us. Their pain point is not something that we are solving and all. Even if we have gotten them through Instagram marketing or Facebook marketing or LinkedIn marketing, we don't want to solve for them, right? These are the people also, by the way, who request a lot of nonsense features, which are useful for them. But there's no guarantee that even if you build these features, they will actually love your product, right? They'll keep telling you the reasons why they are not using your product. They'll keep telling you what is the weakness in your product, but you don't have to focus on that. First, because you have built a product, you have to figure out who was it useful for? Who is it useful for? Why is it useful for them? And then recruit more and more of those people. And that is the essence of PMF, improving the PMF. That is everything there is. Right? It's as simple as that. And if you're a fan of complex things, like just stay with me. So the number one thing that I advocate when you are trying to improve the PMF is the God article written by, and I don't say this lightly, by Rahul Vora, right? If you have not read it, don't read it now. Go and read it later, okay? Now, in this article, I think he talks about these three things, right? So they did a survey, Superhuman did a survey using Sean Ellis test. So Sean Ellis coined the term growth hacker or popularized the term growth hacker. And he talks about, like, he talked to a lot of companies and he realized that if 40% of your customers or users are very disappointed, if you shut your product down today, you have PMF. 40% is a magic number. And he talked to a lot of people. He was VP of growth at Dropbox. He sort of was connected to a lot of good companies and good people. He consulted a lot of companies and all that. 40% is a magic number. And Superhuman just took this simple insight and built something immensely beautiful out of this thing. And Rahul Vora talks about this exercise in this blog post, where he says that we took this survey, and we found that early 2017, we had 22% of people who were very disappointed. But this was not enough. What they did after this was actually beautiful because they actually imitated these whole things. They went after saying that, okay, the people who love our product, who are very disappointed, actually are founders, managers, executives, BD. The people who don't love our product are sales, data scientists, engineers, and all that. And then people who are fence sitters are these. So they actually classified them. They actually understood why they loved their product. Keyboard, speed, fast, shortcuts. And they double down on these things. Right? And because they double down on these things, they could move that 22% to 32%. Right? They could also remove a lot of users who were not part of the initial segment. Right? So they just went through this, define the customer type, context, and use case. Know who loves, who merely uses the product. Know why they prefer your product. Double down on those. And look at the fence sitters who were like, okay, maybe we will be slightly disappointed, but we will not be very disappointed if you shut down the product today. Look at if some of those can be converted by working on things that your super fans love. And that's the recipe that Superhuman used, right? Now, the second, what I believe is, the reason you will fail using Superhuman's playbook is because surveys are faulty, right? We started with saying that surveys are faulty. Don't use NPS, don't use CSAT. And now I'm again going back to saying that, okay, Superhuman's playbook is godlike, it's amazing, right? So there is certain disconnect that is between, like, let's say, surveys there and surveys there. And the disconnect is actually the ARPU, right? So Superhuman sits where Eventbrite sits, which is they're charging $30 per month to the consumer. The ARPU is actually high. So if you are working in a SMB or enterprise segment, you will know this, that when you roll out a survey, your response rates are higher because these people are paying you money. They want to say what they want because they're paying money. But if you roll out a survey on Airbnb, in fact, in Airbnb, it will also work because people spend a lot of money. But if you roll out a survey on Zomato, people don't care. They'll just switch to Swiggy. if you roll out a survey at Facebook, people further don't care, right? So the survey response rates actually suffer a lot when it comes to consumer low ARPU products, which is why if you have a high frequent products where like people have propensity to participate in surveys low, you can't use the superhumans playbook. And that is where most startups struggle, because they try to use superhumans playbook. They don't succeed in doing that, and they are just bewildered that, okay, what happened? Like, why are we not able to do it? Like this Rahul Vora did it. Because there is a difference between the ARPU that people are paying you versus Rahul Vora. You don't charge anything. So people don't care. Superhuman charges $30 a month, so people care. They participate in surveys. But again, there are always solutions to things, which is like, you can always talk to users or experts, right? So this is from one of the articles of Growth Catalyst, where I talk about like how to generate ideas for experimentation. And it is about like, ask your customers, observe your customers, ask operators or experts, observe operators or experts, right? But usually if you get into like, asking your customers through customer interviews, you'll have a better luck, right? Again, the thing is, you have to be sure that, okay, these are the segments, these are the number of people I have to talk in these segments, to make sure that you're talking to everybody so that you can reject or accept certain customer segments for PMF, right? But it's very, very important to know why people prefer your product over alternatives. Without that, you have no chance of improving PMF, right? Now, once you know this and you have started working on it, the fifth step is measuring if the PMF is improving. Now, it ties back to some of the questions that people asked, right? Namely, for frequent products, you need to map your retention cohorts month over month and see that over the months, recent months, the place where this flattens actually is improving. I'm not talking about week 4 or week 1, which is usually the case. People look at week 1 retention is improving. Amazing. That's a good proxy for long-term retention, but that does not equate long-term retention. It's very similar to, funnel optimization, where people say, I think I was part of a discussion where this very senior person, like almost like 15, 20 years of experience in product, was talking about the sign-up flow improved by, the sign-up conversion, which is basically the people who are coming to website to signing up, improved by 30%. Our revenue is 100 crores. So our potential revenue increase is 30 crores, right? And the fallacy there is because you feel that the improvement in one part of the funnel actually goes to the other part of the funnel. But it could be that you improve your sign-up flow by 30% and there is zero improvement in revenue. Same happens with retention. Ultimately, for PMF, the long-term retention has to move. The place where the curve flattens has to move. So keep that in mind. Don't focus on W1, D1, and use them as the proxy for PMF, right? Use them as a proxy to operate on a day-to-day basis, but ultimately you have to measure your long-term retention and use only that to say that your PMF is improving. So that's the first bit. The second bit is look at the market share. For example, this is Airbnb from 2013 to 2018 in lodging sales, right? And you can clearly see their PMF improving, right? The penetration is increasing like anything, including like HomeAway, including Marriott is also sort of increasing because it acquired some company called Starwood. And then, of course, the market in itself is increasing. If you add everything in 2013 versus 2018, the market has significantly gotten bigger, right? And Airbnb has gotten a bigger pie of that market, which sort of led to the IPO, $100 billion IPO for Airbnb, and good success story from Silicon Valley across the globe. So that's basically the infrequent products. And this is basically the frequent products. So you improve, you measure if it is improving. And the last part is you avoid feature creep or reduce time to PMF via an MVP approach. Now, MVP is a very abused term. Usually it's used by business teams when they want something shipped quickly. It's used by product teams if they're shipping a software product, right? But I'm not here to comment on like what happens or what are the bad things that happens. I'm here to give you a sense of how you can use actually MVP to reduce time to PMF or reduce feature creep into your product. Because ultimately, what you're going to get from first 4 steps are the areas to improve or the features to build. So how do you validate so that you don't build a full-fledged feature and ship it and then realize, oh, it's not working, but now we have sunk cost, so we have to keep this feature. We can't kill this feature. We have to keep reiterating this feature and all that, right? How do you make sure that you can quickly validate 5 features and double down on a couple of them rather than investing in all 5 features? And that is where MVP approach actually helps, right? So I think MVP, there was a term which was doing rounds 3 years back, which was RAT, riskiest assumption testing, right? If you ask me, there's no difference between MVP, MLP, minimum lovable product, riskiest assumption test. All are one and the same, because ultimately the MVP is all about validating your riskiest hypothesis. Now that riskiest hypothesis usually exists against 3 things. Enters the growth cycle. It will either around acquisition. If you build it, will they come? Value generation. Do you actually add value to people's life, or are you just like building another Me Too product for people and expecting they will come for it? And will people pay for it? Usually the riskiest hypothesis exists around these 3 things. There are other factors, but in the interest of time, I'm just going to focus on this, right? Now let's look at, how companies tested these riskiest hypotheses. So the first was Zappos. Zappos, what it did was it created a website, said that you can order a shoe. And they took this shoe from the mall or some store and then they shipped it to the consumer, right? So purely like dropshipping model. And this was MVP because they didn't have to spend on warehousing. They didn't have to spend on supply chain and all those things. They could just like get an online order and deliver it. What was it testing against? It was testing against like acquisition and value generation. If we build an online website for shoes, will people come because there is Amazon, right? Will people find some value in it by ordering shoes online, right? So acquisition was the riskiest hypothesis it was going after, followed by value generation. And then there is buffer, by the way. Buffer is terrific because buffer is usually like what they did was basically they created 2 pages. One is like the value proposition page followed by pricing. And if you went inside the pricing, if you clicked on $5 per month option, you would land on the last page where they say that, hello, you caught us before we are ready. So please enter your email and we'll send you a reminder. They didn't build anything. They built a pricing page, they built a value prop page, and then they built a sorry page, right? But they could validate the acquisition and all 3, by the way, acquisition, value creation, and monetization, because they built a pricing page. I'll just try to find if pricing page of buffer MVP. This was the pricing page, right? So depending on the number of people who are coming and choosing $5 or $20, I can actually validate my monetization risk, which is the hardest to validate, right? But Buffer did it because they said that we want to test it out before we actually build it. And this goes back to one of the questions that one of you have asked, which is like, how do I vet if there is PMF before I build something? These people have done it again and again. I think Dropbox is another example, which just built a video and sort of got 70,000 signups on that video. And then there is Robinhood, right? Which sort of got early growth by building MVP, $0 commission for stock trading. And you could get early access. And after this, I think what they did was they created a referral page where you can invite people. And if you invite more people, it will shorten your waitlist, right? So again, Robinhood waitlist is another terrific case study. See, we have added your email address to the sign up queue, 354K people ahead of you. Interested in priority access, get early access by referring your friends, right? So they built virality within the MVP, which is super hard to build. But again, like you see these examples again and again. If you're open to sort of get ideas, more ideas around it, and you do research, you'll see that people have actually gone after riskiest hypothesis and validated them by sort of doing a lot of different things. And most of those have validated the riskiest hypothesis around acquisition, value generation, or monetization. Right? And the last segment before we end this call is when nothing seems to be working, what to do, right? And this is like, when do you pivot, right? And usually there are 4 cases which we have seen historically when people pivot. The first is when the problem you picked actually does not look that important and underserved as you felt it was. So we are big fan of ideas, right? I have an idea and this is an amazing idea and all that. And then somebody asks you, what is the problem it's solving? And then you move to problem and then you realize, oh, problem is actually decent when I put it in, when I speak about it, but when I talk to customers, it does not look that important or underserved, right? So that is the most important reason to consider a pivot, because if the problem you picked is not important or underserved, then there's no point building it. The second is when the solution is not much better, to consider customers to switch from alternatives, right? So even if you have the right problem, the solution to it is almost same as, it's not solved by competition, but it's also not solved in a very, very meaningful way by you. And you don't see a way out of that because of XYZ reasons. That is when you should consider a pivot. By the way, this is where the founder judgment or PM judgment actually is very, very important. Usually, like, the solution can always be improved. So don't give up if it is in the second bucket. But if the problem is actually wrong, you should give up pretty easily is what I recommend. The third is when there is a high opportunity cost. And what it means is you got a better problem and solution. For example, Bourbon got Instagram as a better problem and solution, so they pivoted. Segment, I think it started as a analytics for tutors and all. And then it moved into, APIs for analytics, segment.io, and got acquired in 3 billion or so. So the high opportunity cost usually arises because you got a better problem and solution that you discovered as a part of your journey. And that is when you pivot. And the fourth is when the environment changes unfavorably, right? For example, RBI came with some regulation or the government came with some regulation, which makes your idea unfeasible. That is when you pivot. But usually, like, these are the four things where you should consider pivot. Successful pivots, I think you know a lot of stories. I'm not going to spend a lot of time there. One of the most, I would say, most counterintuitive pivots is actually like Slack coming from a gaming company and all that, right? But you all have learned about pivots. So go and read about Instagram pivot, Slack pivot. In China also, there are a lot of successful like pivot stories. For example, like the founder of Pinduoduo did a lot of things before he moved to this idea. He had a gaming company before he built Pinduoduo. And I believe him building a gaming company was the reason Pinduoduo actually killed it in the market. Because the gamification is what enabled Pinduoduo acquire a majority chunk of the market, right? And by the way, Slack has the same DNA if you look at it, right? Slack sort of follows all the essential things of games. It's delightful. The UI is pretty amazing. It gives you a lot of, aha moments quickly and all that. So Slack looks like a tool that a founder who has built games will build, right? So you'll see that even in successful pivots, a lot of like founders' DNA actually translates into building these products. They can see the products because they have been through that journey. Because the founder, which is Butterfield, went through Flickr and Glitch, he could see a non-boring sort of alternative to email, right? So yeah, that would be sort of all, right? For example, RBI came with some regulation or the government came with some regulation, which makes your idea unfeasible. That is when you pivot. But usually, like, these are the four things where you should consider pivot. Successful pivots, I think you know a lot of stories. I'm not going to spend a lot of time there. One of the most, I would say, most counterintuitive pivots is actually like Slack coming from a gaming company and all that, right? But you all have learned about pivots. So go and read about Instagram pivot, Slack pivot. In China also, there are a lot of successful like pivot stories. For example, like the founder of Pinduoduo did a lot of things before he moved to this idea. He had a gaming company before he built Pinduoduo. And I believe him building a gaming company was the reason Pinduoduo actually killed it in the market. Because the gamification is what enabled Pinduoduo acquire a majority chunk of the market, right? And by the way, Slack has the same DNA if you look at it, right? Slack sort of follows all the essential things of games. It's delightful. The UI is pretty amazing. It gives you a lot of, aha moments quickly and all that. So Slack looks like a tool that a founder who has built games will build, right? So you'll see that even in successful pivots, a lot of like founders' DNA actually translates into building these products. They can see the products because they have been through that journey. Because the founder, which is Butterfield, went through Flickr and Glitch, he could see a non-boring sort of alternative to email, right? So yeah, that would be sort of all, right? For example, RBI came with some regulation, or the government came with some regulation, which makes your idea unfeasible. That is when you pivot. But usually, like, these are the 4 things where you should consider pivot. Successful pivots, I think you know a lot of stories. I'm not going to spend a lot of time there. One of the most, I would say, most counterintuitive pivots is actually like for the PMF, I'll take questions. But before that, there are a couple of more things. The first is when I asked you, how many of you are working with a PMF problem actively or have worked on PMF problem? For the PMF, I saw like certain people talking about it. I'm here to tell you, we all are working on PMF problems. Because PMF is not a one-time discrete event, right? PMF is always changing because the market is always changing. See, PMF usually implies product fits the market, right? But if the market is always changing, the product is always changing. The competitive landscape is always changing. So we all are working on PMF problems, and anything that we learned in this session can actually be applied on any problem that we are working right now, right? And this is a misconception that PMF is useful, like PMF literature is actually useful for just founders or PMs in startups or PMs who are working on 0 to 1 initiatives. It's immensely useful for them. But even if you're adding a new feature to Flipkart or Amazon, PMF literature is actually mega useful for you, right? So go after this literature, learn as much as you can when it comes to PMF, because any product you build, PMF is going to play a key role in either like getting to PMF or strengthening the PMF of that product. The next thing is the context will change the approach. So the ARPU, frequency, stage of the product, state of the product, stage of the company, state of the company, has to change the approach that you take for PMF. We talked about how surveys can be useful for superhuman, but not for others, right? And on this, like, I will just show you. Okay, this is not what I wanted to show you. Okay, it has not been posted. Let me show you a conversation I had. So this is a post I was writing yesterday, which kind of sums up everything you are supposed to know about PMF, including, like, because I said context is very important. This is a transcript from one of the conversations I had last week, right? So it started with a founder asking me about the PMF, right? And this is a B2C app. They were tracking retention, right? And weekly retention on that. And my advice was, of course, retention is good, but can you add monetization to the mix? Because this is a B2C app, and there is a chance that you are giving away too much for free. So just keep monetization in mind while you are making the initial product choices so that it's easier for you down the road, right? But the next question was something like, which is very organic, which is like they had benchmarked retention with similar products. They were at 40% of the best apps retention in terms of week 4, right? Now, where does that leave us? Because this is something we do, right? We go to App Annie, we try to sort of see the benchmarking. How much is the retention for Wink or Spotify if I'm working for a Ghana or JioSaavn, right? So his point was like, how do I know if I have achieved PMF, right? And again, therein lies the point. If you have gone through this session, you'll realize that as long as the retention curve is flattening, W4 is not the sign of PMF, or it being 40% of the top apps is not the sign of PMF. As long as the retention curve is flattening, it's a sign of PMF, right? And then came the next question, which is how do you improve the number, right? And this is where we covered, like, you can go through the superhumans approach, but the problem is you're a B2C app. And in B2C app, the surveys are actually biased. So you have to find the users, segment the users, talk to users, and finally sort of put everything together to make sure that you have the right segment that you're targeting, right? And then it comes to the end where it says, okay, so let's say we have identified the segment for whom the product is working. We will target them and it will improve our retention for sure, right? So that improves our PMF, right? But then there is additional caveat in this case, because it's, like I said, the stage and state of the company also matters. Because it's an early stage product, we have to make sure that segment that you identify for whom it's working is large enough for you. Because if it's not, you have to go after some fence-sitters. Suppose only people who are ordering above 10,000 rupees in fashion are the people with whom you have PMF, but it's a very small market. So that means you have to find out additional avenues of growth, right? So that's the first thing. The second thing is you have to understand why the product is working for them. And you have to optimize your copy, landing pages, everything to attract more of such people, right? And this is how the actual real life conversation goes, if you ask me. The ARPU, frequency, state of the product, stage of the product, stage of the company. Like building quick commerce for Flipkart is very different than building quick commerce for Zepto. And the PMF definitions for both companies are very different, because the top line, bottom line, and everything in between is very different, right? So while it may feel like, okay, it should be the same, what are you saying, Deepak? Like, we'll just flatten the retention and all. In practicality, it actually matters. The stage and state of the company also matters, because you might have limited funds or you might have a lot of funds, and your approach will change accordingly. So I didn't want to, finish this session on a note that, everything is hunky and dory once you have gone through this session. That's not the case. The context will change the approach that you're taking for PMF, right? And be careful around that. Go back to concepts, go back to the key things, and you should be good enough, right? My last request is, like I told you, I love session feedback. So give us session feedback on this link. Give us objective feedback so that I know where are the areas to improve and all. You can also scan the QR code and give that feedback from your phones, right? But yeah, that would be all for now. I'll go to the Q&A section now, and I'll pick some questions. Link of the article, how can one measure market penetration? So Abhilash, usually the market size is easy to get, right? For example, the number of people who file tax in India, right? And market growth rate is also easy to get. And usually if you know the market size and market growth rate, you also know the share of the market that you have. Just tracking that share of the market will tell you about market penetration a lot, right? So that's a way to measure. The second way to measure is look at the industry leader and look at the kind of GMV they have, and just look at what they talk about. For example, if Flipkart says that we have 60% of e-commerce market, and Flipkart GMV is at $15 billion a year, then you can estimate the overall market size from there. And then you can say, if I'm building an e-commerce company today, this is my penetration today, right? So you can do it both ways. You can do take a overall market size and growth rate from a report, or you can look at some of the competitors and other players and sort of look at that. The third approach is slightly different because it's for innovative products, which is where you look at jobs to be done. For example, ChatGPT. If I have to look at the market penetration of ChatGPT, it's hard to get that because there's no product like that when it launched. So in that case, you look after, what is the job it replaces? For example, it is competing with search. So what is the search market? And then go to the market penetration from there. But if you go back to jobs to be done, specific use cases, preference over competition, if you go back to definitions, you'll be able to define the market and measure the market penetration. Link of the article, how can one measure market penetration? So Abhilash, usually the market size is easy to get, right? For example, the number of, Prithvi has this interesting question which ties to this thing, which is, how do you validate riskiest hypothesis for enterprise products? So Prithvi, I think the riskiest hypothesis can be validated by sitting into the client calls. If you're a PM who is building or a founder who is building that, sit in the client calls, sit in the account management calls, which is like existing customers versus potential customers calls, and try to create some sort of interview script, which can take 5 to 10 minutes, and try to have that at the end of the call, or try to ask for some time and do that. But interviews and sitting in those calls is the way, or sitting on those meetings is the way you can validate your riskiest hypothesis for enterprise products. There is no other way. The only other way is to actually sell that product or sell that value proposition, right? In which case you can say that if we build this feature and we charge we create a new tier, will you actually use it, right? So either like get a commitment from them, or the last thing can be, I'll just summarize, right? So the first is sit in the calls and understand. The second is ask if they will be willing to pay or upgrade. The third is, do they solve that problem in some other way, right? If the problem exists today that you're trying to solve through your product, are they solving in some other way? And are they unhappy with it? Is your solution much better than that? If you like move across these three things back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, I think you'll be able to pretty much validate the risk hypothesis for the product. Prithvi has this interesting question which ties to this thing, which is, how do you validate riskiest hypothesis for enterprise products? So Prithvi, I think the riskiest hypothesis, I think Anshul has a question on this, but Anshul didn't paste the question.
Oh, can I ask?
Yeah, you can ask.
Hello, am I audible? Yeah. So you were talking about pivot. So let's say we have two different kind of features on our product, and one is going to generate more revenue than the other, and that is because the market size is bigger in that. But the customers we are getting is from the other segment, right? So we are attracting lower value customers. So how do we do this pivot? Like, what should be the step?
So you are in love with a girl who has friend zoned you, but there is another girl who loves you, or you are in love with a boy who has friend zoned you, and that's the story. Is that?
Kind of.
So think of what will
So
you
it's
do, right?
basically
So,
like you want to. I mean, your majority customer base, you don't want them. You
yes.
want to attract different kind of customers so that the other features improves. I mean, there's a dilemma that should you stick to that one and just double down on that one, or should you pivot to the other thing which might be more lucrative in the future?
Okay, let's go back to the framework and the concepts we covered, right? We talked about you should know why a certain customer prefers you over the alternatives and why a certain customer does not prefers you, right? My sense is you don't have a very clear answer to these questions, which is where you are struggling. If you had a clear answer to these questions, you would find a way to attract the segment that you're going after. Or you'll say that, oh, it looks like this segment is actually already working. Let me double down on that. So founders or PMs usually take one of those two approaches. They either latch onto something that is already working and they try to sort of improve the PMF there, improve the monetization there. Or they say that, okay, let me figure out like why this is not working in this segment. And they will go there, right? But my sense is you are skipping the third and fourth step of improving PMF, which is understanding why something is not working, right? And this is just a hypothesis from my end. If you have an answer, I would say like try to refine that answer. And then you'll quickly come to the conclusion that, okay, do we want to solve these problems that these people have? Or maybe these people don't have these problems that we had assumed, right? So possibly we are looking at wrong segment. Let me give you an example around this, right? So for example, one of the initial hypotheses of pmcurve that I had was founders would love pmcurve because most of the founders I had met, they said that they were not happy with the skill level of their PMs, right? Their existing PMs they had hired, they were not happy with that. And they wanted these PMs to deliver better. And I was like, amazing. I'm just trying to solve this problem. There's a clear PMF. And then 1 year after I went back to those founders, I sat with them. I talked about what I had built and all that. And these founders are like, yeah, I'm not sure. Like we have a lot of things to ship and all that, right? So my most desired segment was not willing to come to my platform. So I have two options there. I can either say that, okay, but this is the desirable segment for which I build my product with. Let me go after them. Or I can say, let me stick to the PMF where it already is. I was like, let me go after them because this is the problem I want to solve. I want founders to be on my side. So I try to understand the problems. And the problems are very different in a founder's life. They mostly know in the early stages, they mostly know what needs to be built, right? And of course, like they want PMs to come with better idea, but they mostly know. And they want PMs to just execute faster, better, and all that. And that is not the problem that I'm solving for them because I'm asking them to take a pause, learn and then rethink and everything. It will definitely improve the prospects for PMs and the founders in the company over time. But their goal is 3 months down the line, next funding round or next this thing or next that thing. They're so much starved for time and energy that they don't have energy to invest in upskilling, right? But there the PMF lies in something different entirely, which is, can I upskill these PMs and get them to founders? Because they would love that, right? So ultimately, if you don't understand the why deeply, why they are doing what they are doing, you might have a problem in your head based on a conversation you had with them, which does not reflect in their behavior because you interpreted it differently. Which is where I would say go back to whys, and it will help you figure out everything afterwards.
Yeah, I understood this. But let's just ask one more question on this. So let's say you wanted experienced folks and you wanted to upskill them, but now you are getting inexperienced ones and you're still getting good revenue. So how will you make this decision now? Like, what should be your metrics? So that, okay, no, I want to go to those, or no, I'm getting these, let's build for them. Like,
So the problem, right? So ultimately, like as a founder or as a PM, the problem matters more than anything. The value creation is at the center of everything.
Yeah.
So there could only be 2 or 3 explanations to why I'm attracting inexperienced folks and not experienced folks. One is, what I consider the problem for experienced folks does not exist. Okay. The second is, my solution is suboptimal. Right. And what the solution and the problem I thought about actually exist for inexperienced folks. Right. So in a way, they are coming because it fits their problems. So now I have to ask a very different question. Do I want to solve this? Is this problem attractive enough for me? Am I excited about this problem? Does it have, like you said, does it have sustained cycle of growth and all? Right? If answer to all of that is true, the only thing that is left is, you as a PM or founder, do you want to solve that problem or not? Right? But if you are problem focused and value focused, more often than not, you will gravitate towards problems that are not solved. And that is what your North Star should be. But for example, like, okay, I'll take a counter example to just, invert the logic I just gave you. The best PMF that pmcurve could have gotten was actually building another cracking the PM interview course. A lot of people have built that. They have succeeded. A lot of even SPMs, PMs with 2-3 years of PM experience have built and succeeded there. So there was a definite, like, even if it's crowded, you can build a better product there. But I didn't want to solve that problem. Now that's a very different thing, because I said that, okay, it's not that I'm changing this landscape by 10x or drastically. So I'm not excited about this problem. Good enough people are already solving this problem. I don't want to crowd that market. So I moved to experienced PM. So there are very 2 different sides of a spectrum that I'm trying to explain to you. First is, like, it should matter to the founder or PM. Second is, like, when it matters, the PM and founders still have to be problem focused and value focused, not focused on key, this is my wish and this is where I want to go.
Yeah, got it. Thanks.
Hawthorne effect, Abhishek, was that a question or? Okay. I'll go to Vijay's question. The second one, solution not offering much differential value over alternatives. Should we actually pivot or drop that problem or rather reiterate? So again, the differential value is not, the current state is not representative of future state, right? So can you time box it and try to figure out some differential value over alternatives? The important point is time boxing it, because there is opportunity cost of not solving another problem, right? Relentless being at something because you want it that way is also not a good thing, right? So can you time box and say that in next 1 year, I'm going to build a much better solution. If I'm not able to build a much better solution, I will just pivot.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, but it's not a straight pivot case, right? Like the other 3, cases where it's straightforward no, but this one's
Yeah.
no.
So
If you
the
want
problem
to-
risk, the problem risk, and this is more of a value risk, right? So problem risk means total pivot. Usually like regulation risk means total pivot. Opportunity risk means total pivot, but this is value risk, and value risk can be managed by adding more value. The only question you need to answer is, can you add more value? Right? The downside of that is you might start feeling that I can add value if I'm being at it, which is why I'm saying just time box it.
Yeah, especially tying back to the example that you were just giving to Anshul's question. If you're seriously looking at a particular problem, the opportunity exists, but you're still kind of specifically looking at that particular problem. Experienced product managers in your case, right? In
Yes.
pmcurve's case. So I know for sure this is the problem I want to solve. Probably at this point in time, my solution is not really making any differential, offering any differential value. If I'm very, very clear with that part, I feel, we should probably not pivot, but explore more in the solution. Yeah.
Explore more solutions, find a way to survive. For example, like if you feel that you can gradually build this thing. For example, like the cracking PM interview part that, okay, what is this? Prabhat, can you stop sharing this? Okay. So especially like, suppose I'll take this example because we have talked about it. Suppose in pmcurve's case, I come to realization that this market will only open slowly to this idea, which is like experienced PMs need to be upskilled, because one of the major problems I have faced is, as compared to US counterparts, we are very shy about learning, because we feel that if you're learning something, if you're open about learning, people feel that we don't know much, right? And that's just a cultural fabric. Like, I'm not saying we need to judge anybody on it. If everybody is doing it the same way in the country, I can't be the outlier. I can't afford to be that outlier because my career progress and everything depends on it, right? So if things are seen in certain way in a society, it can prevent some product from growing. And that is the thing I've seen with pmcurve also. Like, I know people who are in US who are very, very vocal about learning and other things. But at the same time, a lot of people in India are very shy about learning, right? And which is why, like, I realize that it will be a slower market, even if we can be profitable in this market and all that. So we need to add more and more ways to survive, which is where like finding more problems for the same persona is a good strategy. So I didn't go after cracking PM interviews for aspiring PMs. That will just change the whole narrative and thesis of pmcurve.
Yeah.
But what if I found another problem for the persona and I try to get, a runway, a better PMF in a different use case there, and so on and so forth. So you can be focused on a segment of persona, but don't be so much focused on a problem which is either unsolvable or people don't want to solve it today, or it's a cultural nuance, or it's a regulatory nuance and all that, right? We have to be open to the idea that I can fixate on my persona and I can try to solve like different problems for them.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Totally makes sense.